Hi, everybody. Hi, nice to see you all. Welcome to our Coffee with the Collective. I'm here with my beautiful, wonderful, amazing partner, Lindsay Kuzi from the Good Place Collective. I am Sarah, for those of you that don't know me, and I am so incredibly excited to introduce the fantastic Sherry Rothwell, who is a holistic nutritionist specializing in helping people with weight loss without dieting or deprivation. So that sounds pretty cool. I can't wait to learn more about that and how you do that. So Sherry, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Sherry, we are so thrilled to have you here. And gosh, I'm trying to think when it was that I met you originally, but it's been a little while. And it's just so cool to spend some time with you, share space with you, and get to know you even better, share your business with the Good Place Collective. So we would love to know, could you tell us a little bit more about your business, the kinds of people that you help, and what your program potentially looks like?
Okay, yeah. So my program is based on how to lose weight without dieting or giving up your pleasure in food. So that is totally different than, most of the approaches that are out there for weight loss, which are basically just reduce your calories, exercise more, like the whole saying, eat less, move more. And basically, the approach that I take is to address things from a holistic perspective. So it's not at all about counting calories. Exercise is optional. And it's really about creating balance in the body, addressing the underlying health conditions that actually cause somebody to be susceptible to weight gain, and also the emotional things that cause a person to be in a chronic state of stress, which actually will cause the body to store fat. Even if you don't have one extra calorie, you can actually store fat from excess cortisol from chronic stress. So that's a big part of things. Balancing hormones and really looking at how do you eat the same foods that you eat and you love and enjoy, but turn them into healthy versions that don't actually cause weight gain.
Right.
So that's one of the things that people really struggle with is they think that if they're going to lose weight, they're going to have to eat like a rabbit, right? Like this idea of you have to just eat salad and all these low calorie foods to lose weight. That's not true. And even if it were, the problem is with that is that it's not sustainable. It's not something a person can do for very long. That requires willpower instead of actually changing like the inner terrain of the body, changing the mindset, changing the lifestyle permanently, and having a paradigm shift that actually causes you to choose to eat things that are healthy and delicious simultaneously. And of course, giving up that idea that it's going to happen overnight and that, weight loss is your only goal. Your goal first has to be health.
Right.
So that's basically what my programs are based on is learning how to do that, whether it's through I've got e-courses, private services, and group coaching program.
I
That's
love
beautiful. Sherry, I love that. And I love that it's stepping away from this, you can be thin tomorrow if you just do this, if you just do that, because I think we're surrounded with a lot of quick fixes,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really empower us with the ability to make significant changes um,
Yeah.
that are investing in our better self, like
it.
1 year down the line, 2 years down the line, like where are we going to be 5 or 10 years down the line?
Yeah, exactly. People get pulled in by that quick results that you get
Yeah.
by starving yourself, basically.
Yeah.
And then, you get that quick result and you see, like, oh, from experience, I noticed that, oh, if I exercise like crazy and if I eat like very little, I will lose weight. But that is a temporary thing that the body will do until the metabolism actually slows down in response to that because it thinks you're in famine, right? Like it doesn't know that you're choosing not to eat, that it's not famine. So
Right.
your metabolism slows down to make up for that.
Yeah.
And then people end up they hit a plateau. And then, of course, all their feasting programs kick in because it's famine. And then you switch over to feast, right?
Right.
And then what happens is then people end up quitting their diet because they run out of willpower. They end up feasting on a metabolism that's now slower than when they started. And then
Right.
they end up with that rebound weight gain. They haven't learned anything. They haven't transformed anything. So basically, they just go back to their old way and then they get the same results as before, but now it's worse because they've damaged their metabolism. And that's a cycle that people just continually do over and over again. And it's partly just because that's what we've been educated to do. We've been educated to believe that the only thing to concern ourselves with is calories. And that mindset is what keeps people in that diet mentality.
Yeah.
That's so true. And it's really illuminating for me. I'm just like, I chat with my clients all day long, and
Yeah.
there's people who struggle with their weight, or they struggle with healthy habits. And it's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody just yesterday, and they're like, Lindsay, you're so slender. Like, how did that happen? And I'm like, gosh, I've been working on my shape for 10 or 12 years. It started with me feeling like I was overweight, and I needed education,
Yeah.
right? And that's where it was like these small, and I said, so don't look at it like all these big things you have to do. I was like,
Yeah.
in fact, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like, finding the smallest change that you can make, it's almost laughable. It's so easy to make,
Yeah.
because you're setting yourself up for those little success
Right. Yeah. And
streaks,
if it's something
right?
you can do permanently, then the results that you get from it will be permanent. But
Yes.
if it's not something you can permanently do, then your results are going to be temporary, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
that's what people do.
Sherry, I'm curious, like how did you end up doing this kind of work? Like what's your story? Where did you end up putting together programs like this?
Well, I've been in the natural health industry for like 20 years. Started off working in health food stores. Long story for how I got into the health field, but I started off working in the prenatal health realm, and then also gut health for mothers who had children with food sensitivities and things like that. So I did that for like a long time, and suddenly I had my own health issue come up, and I wasn't really conscious of what was going on. But I literally, within about 2 months, gained over 20 pounds. And I'd already been like a little bit overweight from having babies, which is another whole, thing that happens with our hormones. Like, talking about it, what is the cause of fat gain? It's not calories, it's actually hormones. This is why so many women have trouble after, even if they're eating the same diet as before had babies, they can't lose that extra weight after having babies. And it's a combination of hormones and then stress of becoming a mother. So I'd accepted that already, right? I was already like, 10, 15, 20 pounds overweight after having children, just kind of like, doing a little bit of this. And I'd accepted that because I was like, I'm not going to diet. Like, if this is just the reality now after having babies, that I'm going to be a little bit overweight, no big deal. Accepted it. But then when I had that 20 pounds in 2 months, and I freaked out. Like, I didn't have a scale in my house. So I didn't, and I was always wearing really stretchy clothes. So I didn't notice anything tight, right?
Yeah.
I thought I looked bloated, but I didn't have the self concept as being really overweight. So it just didn't occur to me. And I'd gone on a trip, and on this trip, I'd walked past a mirror. I was in a hotel, and I saw my stomach. It looked really bloated, right? I was like, oh, this hotel food must be terrible, because like I'm so bloated, I look pregnant.
Right.
So anyways, can you still see me fine? My computer did something weird. Is it
Yeah.
okay? Okay.
Yep. We're with you.
I don't know what's going on. Yeah, so I basically got home from this trip. I was at my mom's having dinner. Again, I didn't have a scale at home, so I didn't know how much I weighed. But I knew what my baseline weight was just usually around 150 to 155 pounds. And I'm 5'3". So that was considered overweight, but not obese. So anyway, I get on my mom's scale, and I look at this number, and it says 176 pounds. And I literally go into fight or flight. Like, I literally feel the blood draining out of my vital organs into my extremities. Like, I'm going to run, right? I walk up the stairs. I'm literally like, I feel like I'm in some sort of altered state of consciousness. Like, my brain is literally like how in the movies when they're like, they have the character and they're going, whoa, whoa, whoa. And all the voices are like,
Gosh.
you can't hear what they're saying. Like, that was happening to me in real life. Like, I was sitting at the dining room table. People were like, pass the potatoes, pass the whatever. And I'm like a robot, I'm like responding. But all I'm doing in my head is I'm like Rolodexing my brain. I'm like, what happened? Like, how could this be? Like, how could I be health conscious? I'd been like, plant-based for like 13 years, like totally clean eating. And I don't eat junk food. I'm like, how could I be obese? Right? Like, I just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
So for an entire year, I sat in a place of complete futility. I just literally was like, if I could eat like this, if I'm already a nutritionist, I know how to eat healthy, and end up obese, then there's no help for anyone, like, or hope for anyone, right? Like I was just like, screw it, that futile place where you get.
Yes. Well, you're like, I did all the things. I know the things. I implemented the things. What happened?
Yeah. And so extreme, right? Like it was just a total shock. And then, and I went into victim consciousness mode, right? With the futility. So I didn't do anything for about about year. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, I have a decision I can make here. One is that I just continue down this path. Like I really see like there's a lot of women and they're like, this happened to me when I was 36, by the way. I'm almost 45 now.
Okay.
So I saw all these women in their 40s and up, and they were typically overweight, most women past that age. And then I was looking around at like all these grannies, they're all overweight, right? So I'm like, well, maybe that I should just accept this. This is how it is. And, I was trying to justify it. I'm like, oh, grannies are cute. I don't mind being an old granny. It's so cute. But I'm like 36 years old, right? And I'm trying to justify it by like looking at grandmas, right? Silly. And then I was like, yeah, but that's not necessarily the case. I could think of these other women that I'd known of that were very fit and healthy, well into their like, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So I'm like, well, it's not that it has to be that way. Obviously, these two different groups of women are making different choices or have different knowledge, right?
Right.
So I just had to make a decision, like, which path am I going to choose? Am I going to choose to just go down the path everybody goes down, to just let myself go and like let nature take its course when it goes into that degenerative state, right? Because if we're not actively doing something to improve our lives, we kind of naturally go the other way, right?
Yeah.
So it's normal and common in the society, but doesn't mean that it has to be that way, right?
Right.
So I chose the other way. And I was like, I'm going to figure this out. Like, I don't know what's going on. Obviously, like, I think I know everything, but obviously I don't, because this is the results that, are right in front of me. So obviously there's something missing. So I figured it out. And it was really interesting because it took a situation in which I had a deadline in front of me to figure it out. And it was hilarious because prior to this point, when I was doing nutrition, it was all gut focused. So I was like, teaching how to make cultured foods. And I had like these courses online for like all this traditional food stuff. So this woman had found me because of that business. It was prior to the work I'm doing now. And she was like, oh, I'm like doing this weight loss summit. And like, I know you don't do weight loss, but I just keep getting the message that you're supposed to be on this telesummit, right? And I'm like, oh, for God's sake, like this woman has no idea what has happened to me.
Yeah, wow.
And then I'm like, okay, I have this opportunity. I can use this as an opportunity and a catalyst for me to actually make this change and figure this out. Or I can like beat myself up and say like, I'm a fraud and I don't know what I'm doing and and be like, no, I can't do it because I'm obese. Right.
Right.
So I chose the other. I chose to, take up the challenge. And at this point, I still didn't know all the answers, but I did know two things. I knew two things that a person could do to lose weight. Number one was, first of all, you have to eat a whole foods diet. Like you can't not be eating natural foods and expect to be optimally healthy. And then I also knew that if you did a cleanse, a certain type of cleanse, that you would release a bunch of weight that's due to inflammation and toxicity. So I knew those two things. And I thought, well, if I can at least, I know I'm already eat the whole foods diet, but that's not enough in my case. It's enough for, a 25-year-old, not enough for where I was at with my hormones going into havoc. But then the next thing was doing the cleanse. So I basically did a cleanse. I got myself out of the obese category into the overweight category. So I felt like, okay, I can do this.
Right, it's happening, momentum.
So I did the summit, but I still at that point did not specialize in weight loss. I still wasn't even working with people for weight loss, right? So I didn't actually start my weight loss focus until I actually got myself out of even being overweight, right? So
yeah,
I spent the next year, studying and figuring out what the missing piece was. And it really was, for me, it was the hormonal imbalance. that basically any person who has extra body fat, especially if they eat a whole foods diet, they're having a problem with their insulin. They have excess insulin. And unfortunately, our society puts the conversation of insulin inside of only diabetes, a conversation about diabetes. But there's insulin resistance is a spectrum. I'll try to keep it inside the camera. It's a spectrum, right? So on one side, you may just be somebody who's hangry and you have to eat all the time. Okay. And then there's full-blown diabetes and there's everything in between. So I figured it out for me. Like I had been ignoring those hypoglycemic symptoms since my early 20s because I could get away with ignoring it, right? Because it wasn't resulting in this intense symptom that I was not gonna not ignore anymore, right?
Yes.
So, and there's like a whole bunch of different susceptibility. Like my biological father, he is insulin injecting diabetic, so I have like a family history of that tendency.
Yeah,
also Métis, right? So any person who's not white is more likely to be susceptible to insulin resistance. But our culture of food, standard North American diet, is so out of whack that it doesn't matter what your race is.
Yeah.
There's just too much sugar, and eventually everybody's has too much insulin, right? So because of you just can't get away from it, and so basically the older you get, the worse it gets. So yeah,
I'm so inspired by you sharing this, Sherry, because it's a conversation that doesn't get talked about a lot, right? Like talking about these parts and pieces, and even my journey, like, oh my gosh, why was this not like, why do I not know this, and why isn't this part of common conversation? And
I
even
know
with professionals, yeah, like people that you're reaching out to, right? Like, I don't know what the answers are. So I really appreciate you sharing this, and obviously you have so much information, and you have your programs that you're offering. And I just love that you've been consistent with yourself too, right? Like you're walking the walk, you're talking the talk, you've done the hard work yourself. And I think that is just, it's so beautiful. And I think it makes it easy for people to be like, oh my gosh, she gets it. Like she used to be just like me. And
well, that's what's funny too. I was thinking that too, Lindsay, because you said, Sherry, that you were at this point where you'd done this summit, were learning all this stuff, but you didn't really know anything, you hadn't studied other than your experience, but really that's what makes it most valuable, I think, right? Because you're now relatable to the people that need your help, which I know in my experience has, when people hear, my story they're like, oh, you too. They don't, you're not putting yourself in this pedestal where they think, oh, I want to be like her.
Right.
And you don't have a story, people can't relate to that. So it's really, it's really cool that you kind of just dove into it and said, okay, well, I'm going to just use my journey to now create these new programs and this new way of helping people because, of my experience, which I think is just so incredible.
Yeah, so inspiring. So inspiring.
It's amazing that life just puts you on these different paths.
Yeah.
Never, ever, thought of doing weight loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, gosh, I'm like sitting here like so inspired by you. But Sherry, I'm wondering, like, who inspires you? What inspires you to keep doing the work that you do? And I mean, I feel like you had a lot of self-motivation through the journey that you've experienced. But what continues to inspire you to offer these services to the public and to your community?
Well, I'm like a learnaholic, so I follow so many different experts in the fields. For people that want to follow up on some of the things that I mentioned, a good author to follow up would be Jason Fung. He's a kidney specialist that works with people with diabetes because when that gets so extreme, right, your kidneys shut down. And so he had to become an expert, right, on the subject because everybody who has diabetes, not everybody, but a lot of people, like a large percentage, are overweight, and they need to basically change their diet, right? Like, because diabetes is a lifestyle disease. So he has a whole entire approach to like healing insulin resistance that involves a lot of things like fasting. A lot of people benefit from that, and he gets amazing results with that. So if that's attractive to people, that's a great person to follow to learn about intermittent fasting.
Yes.
It's not something I use a lot in my own work, just because a lot of women are depleted, especially after having babies. And even the fasting without extreme rest along with the fasting will actually they won't even lose any weight, right? Because their metabolisms are they're too stressed and their metabolisms are too damaged. But for a person who's hasn't done a lot of damage, or they're younger, or men, it seems to be really, really helpful. Another person who's a great person to follow would be John Gabriel. He wrote a book called The Gabriel Method. And, basically, like, anybody who is like following the physiology of weight loss, that actually understands how the body works, is going to tell you the same stuff. So if you go and read Dr. Fung's work, if you read, actually, do I have it on me? I actually wrote a book. Like, where is it?
Oh, that's so cool. Oh my gosh. Speaking of authors.
It's not in my hand, but I just, I put together like a really quick read for people that don't like to read. It's called Lose Weight Without Dieting. It's on Amazon.
It's perfect.
So like if you read what I'm putting out there, if you read my blogs, if you follow me, go to my website, consume my free gifts and trainings. If you go to Jason Fung, if you read his books, if you read John Gabriel's book, The Gabriel Method, you're going to hear us saying all the same thing. And the reason why is because it's based on physiology. It's based on how the body actually works. So if people are knowledgeable about how the body works, they're going to create the same approach to help you lose weight, because that's based on truth, how the body works, right? So yeah, I'm totally in alignment with what they do. One thing I really like about John Gabriel's work is that he did a lot of emotional work and a lot of visualization. So he was like extremely obese, like extremely, extremely obese. And he was able to use visualization along with eating healthy to lose weight and doing it properly. So that, because like a lot of people, you'll notice they like say they do this water fasting for a long time, or like calorie restriction, and they lose a ton of weight fast. They end up with all this hanging skin because number one, it was too fast. Number two, they weren't providing their skin cells with the nourishment to like heal, right, as they were losing weight. So that's, obviously not healthy. So John used a natural whole foods diet to lose weight, and he did visualization. And this man literally has no hanging skin, right? Like it's his story is so powerful. And one of the things that's similar about our story is that he was under extreme stress, and it's not just the diet that will cause you to store fat, but like I was saying earlier, cortisol, that hormone that's produced when you're in a state of chronic stress, that should only be when you're like running from a lion or a tiger. If it's constantly being excreted in your body, then you are going to be stimulating insulin again, your fat storage hormone.
Right.
So he was under a lot of chronic stress, and same thing when I had my weight gain in my mid 30s, also under a lot of chronic stress, multiple things like, a marriage is dysfunctional, the stresses of just being a mother, being, that person who cooks 3 whole food meals from scratch every single day, is raised by, mother who's a clean freak, trying to keep everything perfect, then running a business, like all the things.
All the things. Well, and at the same time too, it's like, gosh, how many people do we know that also kind of fit that bill of stress and doing the things and the perfectionism? I'm a guilty perfectionist,
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my
I
gosh.
love that you obviously approach, being a holistic nutritionist, you holistically approach your clients. And I think, it's like me, I have, again, many years worked on my relationship with food, and there are so many components that, yes, like you said, it's important to choose those whole foods. It's important to eat right, and it's important to do all the obvious things. But you're right, there's such an emotional component too, and things like visualization can be really helpful, and just aware. Like I know for me, sometimes it's like I'm opening the fridge and I'm like, why am I here? I just ate dinner, right? And then you realize like, oh, it's because I'm stressed about this, I'm distracted, I'm eating because it's comfort, right? And so that's just one example of it. But it's like, again, I love that it sounds like you're doing those things where you're kind of creating, a very holistic approach to think about not just the food and what you're putting into your body, but how and when, and we're looking at how the body's functioning and your relationship with eating and all that great stuff. And you obviously just have so much to share. You're just full of knowledge and wisdom. And Sherry, I'm just so excited that we got to do this interview and introduce you to the collective. Please share with us and everybody watching where they can find you, because you clearly have, places to send them where you've got lots of information. So where can people find you?
So the best thing to do is go to my website.
Okay.
It's www.delishdiet.ca.
Okay.
And put your name in some box there. Get some kind of free gift.
Love it.
Ways of getting free gifts on my website.
Awesome.
And then, of course, you'll get some useful, helpful, actionable advice through those free gifts. And then you'll be on my email list. And I'm, constantly, anything new that I put out that's free goes out there. And then also there is my Facebook page as well. And I guess just put Delish Diet in the search engine there on Facebook under pages, and that should come up.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Also a free group as well that goes with that page.
Oh my
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody follows you and looks at that group and joins in, because like I say, you clearly have so much wisdom to share. Thank you so much for being here with Coffee with the Collective. So grateful to have you here. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks, Lindsay. I hope everyone has a great day.
Yes, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.